aggressor?
Well,
Some other thing?
equal rights and opportunities to become full citizens.
Well, it was, think of something more violent that would have been happening during this Russian Civil War.
Is it pogroms?
Yeah.
Well, the Bolsheviks' enemies were anti-Semitic. The
Yeah,
whites.
that and the pogroms. Basically, between 1919 and 1921, the Jews were pogromized by virtually every organized and unorganized army that was sweeping through the countryside. You had, and a lot of this, who goes into this really well is the historian Zvi Gittelman. He has a lot of numbers on exactly how many Jews were killed and
What's
all
his
that.
name,
Zvi Gittelman. But so they were pogromized by the white armies of Denikin, Wrangel, Kolchak. They were terrorized by the anarchists, the Ukrainian National Army, who was kind of separating. They were, Petlura brutalized a lot of Jews, and that's not even to mention all the various Ottomans, kind of the chieftains that had their own clans going. So we're talking about within, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, about 2,000 pogroms, and that's 30,000 Jews killed directly, about 150,000 killed as a result of injury and sickness. And now the only army that was not systematically killing the Jews were the Reds, which isn't to say they didn't kill a few. I mean, everybody had to get in on the action. So there were about 700 Jews that were also killed by the Reds, but with a few detachments. But in general, this wasn't being approved of. So the Jews began to regard the Red Army as the only army that was going to protect them. And you had people who were ideologically opposed to Bolshevism joining the Red Army to avenge the murder of their mothers and their sisters. There were, journalists noticed entire regiments made of Jews at train stations, boys who maybe were wearing kippas or earlocks, who were part of the Red Army. And it kind of made no sense, right? Because they're part of this army of avowed atheists, but they're obviously practicing Jews. And who, this one story that I was going to talk about yesterday, but I didn't, was the rabbi's son. Have you read that Bible story? It's a great story, I think, because it really shows initially what kind of kasha people had in their head, what kind of porridge. I'll read, I'm not going to read the whole story. It's a 2-page story. It's beautiful. But I'll read you a paragraph from it that I think is just both in terms of literature and in terms of capturing the mindset of these people who were joining the Red Army for non-ideological reasons, but very personal reasons. So the story is about these two guys, and they're riding the train, and they see at one of the stations the son of their town rabbi. And this guy is half dead. His clothes is in tatters. He's about to collapse, and you're not allowed to pull up these people into the train, but they pull him up. And I'll read this. I, who had met him during one of my nights of wandering, packed the scattered belongings of Red Army soldier Ilya Bratislavsky into my suitcase. I threw everything together in a jumble, the mandates of the political agitator and the mementos of a Jewish poet. Portraits of Lenin and Maimonides lay side by side. The gnarled steel of Lenin's skull and the listless silk of the Maimonides portrait. A lock of woman's hair lay in a book of the resolutions of the Sixth Party Congress, and crooked lines of ancient Hebrew verse huddled in the margins of the communist pamphlets. Pages of the Song of Songs and revolver cartridges drizzled on me in a sad, sparse rain. I love this paragraph. I mean, I'm a writer, so anything that I can kind of steal as a technique I like. And I always thought, has anyone here read Tim O'Brien's story, The Things They Carried? It's a famous story, American story about the Vietnam War, and it's about this regiment of Vietnam soldiers who are carrying things in their backpacks, and the entire story is just a set of lists of all the things they carry in their backpacks, and it's a way of seeing this intimate portrait of American soldiers. I think, my theory is that Tim O'Brien totally got the idea from this story. And it's funny to see the evolution of from one story into another. You never know who people borrow ideas from, and you'd never think, that necessarily an American writer would borrow from Babel, but level has influenced a lot of American writers. So that's my personal theory. But I think it shows that this guy, he has Maimonides pamphlets and a Maimonides portrait and pamphlets from the Sixth Party Congress, and in them he's writing Hebrew poetry. So and this was happening to such a degree that Trotsky was warning the communists that these people are not going to make the best communists. He didn't even really want these people so much joining the Reds, because he understood that they weren't joining for ideological reasons. They were joining because their families had been slaughtered and they wanted some kind of revenge. Okay, so the Bolsheviks came to power. What happened next? Well, on the one hand, they were launching this battle against Judaism and Hebrew. On the other hand, there was almost a resurgence of Yiddish culture happening at this time. Why is that? How did Nehama Shapiro's daughters end up in a secular Yiddish school? The Bolsheviks knew that they had to sell communism to all the various peoples of the Soviet Union. You had the Caucasus and Central Asia to deal with too, and these were, they weren't necessarily the workers. And Stalin actually had an interesting definition of proletariat culture. He said it was socialist in content and national in form. He knew that in order to get these people on board, he would have to use their languages, their way of doing things, their theaters, and sell it to them in the language they knew. So Yiddish was considered like the language of the people. So while yeshivas and headers were being pushed underground or closed down, the Communist Party was actually funding magazines and newspapers and schools in the local languages in Georgian. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I just want to add a couple of things. I think it is important to keep a few things in perspective, that it was not against the Judaism. It was against the religion.
Yes,
Judaism
exactly.
happens to be just one of the major religions. So by the same force, or maybe even with higher force, the seminaries were closed down, and the Christian clergy was persecuted. I think even more severe as the Jewish clergy, because Jewish clergy was kind of foreign to the Bolsheviks. It was rather relatively small. Yeah, it was probably big in Khorasan, but remember again another fact which I think is worth to mentioning, that the Khorasan is one of the shtetls. There was a very narrow band where the Jews were allowed to live before the revolution. Maybe not everybody knows that. Yeah, band of settlements. So Khorasan is one of those shtetls, one of those settlements. That's why it had the significant Hebrew speaking, I don't think Hebrew, but Yiddish speaking population. It was totally different in Russia, for instance. In Russia. There was no such thing. Yeah, there are very few Jews, not enough to even think about secular Jewish education. So that was, the secular Jewish education was a very specific phenomenon, just for those shtetls along that band of settlements.
Right, but can I just, I think the point you're trying to make, just to clarify from my own mind, it wasn't a war against Jews per se,
Correct.
Jews living as Jews.
No.
It was a war, really, what you would say, against Yiddishkeit. They wanted to destroy the Jewish religion, Jewish religious practice.
Right.
But it wasn't.
No. It's not what I wanted to say. It was much broader war against religion.
I agree with you. It wasn't. I was going to make the point. It wasn't exclusively directed against the Jewish religion.
Right.
Christianity suffered too. So there are plenty of images of churches being destroyed as well as. So what they wanted to do to substitute for the Jewish religion is that they would encourage Jewish culture.
Right.
And Yiddish was part of that culture. So it would be a kind of a Judaism denuded of its ritual and of its belief in God. And I think that went across the board with Christianity and to a certain extent.
Right.
But was that intended as a Trojan horse until they could get around the Russification?
Well, that's
No, it was true.
All along they planned
It was
to
sincere.